Καλησπέρα σας και καλώς ήλθατε. Good evening and welcome. Before I start introducing tonight's lecturer, I would like to let you know that we have books on sale tonight. Some of the books are The Carpet Weaver of Usak, that's $30. Proxy Brides, $50. Someone Else's War, it's a novel by Phil Nikoloudis, it's only $5. Politics of Forgetting by Martin Brown, that's a new book, that's $40. And I think 2 or 3 more. Now, also we have a few seminars without sponsors. If you would like to sponsor one of our seminars or buy a book, please see Dimitra or me later on, after we finish. Now, next week's lecture on the 1st of August is by Dr. Roslyn Bell, and the title is Alexander in Art, the Legend and His Legacy. Now, a few words about the lecturer and the topic she chose to present tonight. Now, Dr. Stavroula or Stephie Nikoloudis is an archaeologist who specializes in the Aegean Bronze Age and the Linear B script, which reflects the oldest surviving form of the Greek language. In July of 2018, she took on the role of Greek Studies Coordinator at La Trobe University, and her teaching centers on ancient and modern Greek language and literature. Tonight's talk concentrates on the folk song known as the Bridge of Arta, το γεφύρι της Άρτας, a ballad about the trials and tribulations associated with the construction of a bridge and the turmoil that this project brings to the master builder and his wife. This presentation aims to highlight the continuing value and relevance of the study of demotic songs, demotica τραγούδια, for our contemporary society. Please welcome Dr. Stephie Nikoloudis.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for coming tonight. My thanks to the Kinotita for inviting me to present this talk as part of the History and Culture seminars, and my thanks also to tonight's sponsors, Dr. Chris Fifis and Mr. George Galanopoulos, for their continuing support of Greek studies at La Trobe. One of my responsibilities as coordinator of the program is to advertise our work as widely as possible. So I hope it's okay with you if I take about 5 minutes to do just that. A reminder, first of all, that La Trobe is the only university in Victoria that offers a comprehensive program in Greek language and culture, from beginners right through to the PhD level. We have 2 language streams, one for students who have completed VCE Greek, that's our advanced stream, and one for complete beginners with no prior formal study of Greek. And then there are the students who are somewhere in between. They come and speak to us and we'll try our best to find the right class for them. So please, make sure to spread the word that there is beginners at university. What we've realised during our recent visits to high schools is that a lot of students don't know that they think that they can only do Greek at university level if they've done it at VCE. That's not the case. If somebody stopped doing Greek during high school or just doesn't feel comfortable, they can come and start Greek from scratch at university. So that's an important point to highlight. This year we've introduced 3 new culture subjects as a way of updating our curriculum. in semester 1, we offered a poetry class where we look at poetry right from the beginning, from Homer, the Homeric epic, so the Iliad covering the Trojan War, and the Odyssey, which looks at one of those heroes' journey back home to Ithaca. Greek folk songs are also looked at during this class, and then we focus on the great poets of the 19th and 20th century, Kavafi, Ritsos, Elitis. We also then take a look at contemporary Greek poets influenced by the global financial crisis, and finally our local Greek Australian poets of the first, second and now third generation. In second semester, we have a new class called Multicultural Australia, the Greek Contribution. It's a subject whose aim is to enable students to access the material in the Daedalus archives of the Hellenic diaspora. This is a collection that contains all sorts of objects, letters, photos, books, cinema equipment. They all relate to the migration of Greeks to Australia. It's a unique resource of national historical significance, and this subject, along with the research seminar series that we're holding in conjunction with the Greek community, are two means by which we're trying to incorporate the archives into the teaching and research initiatives of the Greek Studies program. Our next talk, by the way, is on the 21st of August. It's going to be presented by Dr. Kostadina Dounis on growing up Greek in Australia in the 50s and 60s. That's not to be missed, so I hope to see you there. We've also distributed some flyers that indicate our lectures of that series and some other promotional material. There's also some at the back, so if you've missed out, please feel free to go and pick up a few flyers at the end. We continue to run the very popular interdisciplinary subject Ethnic and Civil Conflict in Southern Europe and Cyprus. That's taught by Dimitris Gonis. And we also offer a summer class, Imagined Communities in our Contemporary World, which looks at the settlement of Greeks right around the globe. Our third new subject this year is an overseas study tour, and this will count towards a degree. It's a way for our students to be immersed in the language and culture of Greece for a whole 3 weeks. It's just a point about students at different universities. If they want to study Greek but their university does not offer it, they might be able to get permission from their host institution to take it as a cross-institutional subject. It's worth keeping that in mind. We do have some students from other places, RMIT for instance, who are studying Greek with us in that way. And then it's also important to know that if students want to study Greek but they can't fit it into their study plan, there are sometimes a restricted number of electives that they can take, then they could enrol in a diploma in languages. Whether they're at La Trobe or at another university. And this means usually that they end up finishing about a year later, but they end up with another set of qualifications. La Trobe is lucky to have a very vibrant student club, so this is another bonus for students studying there. They can connect and create lifelong friendships with people who have similar backgrounds and interests. And then finally, it's the university's open day in about 2 weeks' time on the 4th of August. So please feel free to come along, visit the campus, find out more about Greek and the other courses that the university offers. We also recently began a Facebook page, so that's another way to keep up to date with our activities. And a special thank you to our student, Anthea Barnoussis, who's doing a terrific job administering the site, as well as yes, thank you, Anthea, as well as to other current and past students from La Trobe and elsewhere who are supporting our initiatives in a variety of ways, including by attending tonight's event. Thank you, Pedia, for coming. Their commitment to Greek studies and their love for Greek studies is inspiring, and I really appreciate it. I mentioned Anthea. I should also mention Margarita, who spent the entire weekend with us at the beginning of the year at the Lonsdale Street Festival, trying to encourage as many people to take up Greek as she could. There's Costa and Connor, who are always there to help when I call on them. Ari and so many others. Elizabeth, Susan, Dee. Thank you all, and all the others that I haven't mentioned. I have to stop so that I can get on with the lecture now, but we really appreciate your help. Okay, so it's time to get on with the lecture. Thank you, Costa. Folk songs, known in Greek as demotica τραγούδια, are songs of the common people, the demos. These songs often accompanied milestones in life, birth, marriage, death. They offer valuable insights into village life. They express the beliefs and values of traditional Greek society. Why are Greek folk songs relevant to us today? Are they relevant? This is the question that I'll be attempting to answer tonight. Basically, I believe that the messages they conveyed to their audiences in the past and the questions they raised about how people ought to live their lives are just as important for us to consider today in our contemporary, modern, Twitter, Instagram and Facebook-filled world. In terms of the date of these songs, they're first attested in written form in the 15th century. So just to have a snapshot of Greek chronology, if you focus on the periods in orange, you'll see Homer and Homeric epics around about the 8th, 7th centuries BCE. Then we have the classical period, which many of us are familiar with. It starts with the Persian Wars, the Greeks combining to face the external threat of the Persians. And then it ends with the devastating civil war, basically the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta and their allies. Then we have the Hellenistic period. That's when the lands that Alexander the Great had conquered are divided amongst his generals, followed by the Roman Empire. During the Roman period, at some point, there's a breakaway from the capital in Rome, and we have the Eastern Roman Empire, or the Byzantine period, at the end there. And finally, after the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, we have the beginning of what we call the modern Greek era. So our first folk songs attested in written form occur here in the 15th century. But there's a lot of debate on their date of origin and their original source. Some scholars see in them similarities with Homeric phrases and imagery and other poetic devices. Most scholars consider that they originated during the Byzantine period, possibly influenced by contemporary Roman verse. But as Beaton comments, whatever their source of origin, and there's no consensus, a source wouldn't actually explain the nature and quality of the folk songs as we have them today. The folk songs deserve attention in their own right. What is clear is that they're part of a long oral poetic tradition. They were sung, performed as part of an oral tradition long before they started to be written down and studied as poetry. There are different kinds of folk songs. There are fictional ballads, and these deal with supernatural events. There's an element of fantasy in them. Historical songs based on historical events. So we have the acritic songs talking about the guards, the border guards of the eastern frontier of the Byzantine Empire, the acre of the empire. We also have cleftic songs talking about the rebels rising against the Ottoman rulers. Social songs, so there are songs about weddings, sung at weddings, death, lamentations, migration to foreign lands, lullabies sung to put babies to sleep, work songs to help pass the time working in the fields or around the house. These categories, though, are quite arbitrary because there are plenty of examples of songs being performed at more than one kind of event. For example, So in other words, there's overlap in the content that allows the poems to be sung at more than one event. Death songs, for instance, and songs about migration both share the theme of loss, so they could function as either. The Bridge of Arta, which we'll look at tonight, is sung as a ballad, a narrative song, but also as a lamentation because it involves a death. Our song then is a fictional ballad about the problems associated with the construction of the Bridge of Arta and the turmoil that this brings to the life of the master builder in charge of this project and his wife. This is the actual Bridge of Arta in northwest Greece, in Epirus. So there's a little map with a star showing you the general area. The actual bridge is built of stone. It's a stone bridge, and the current one that we have is believed to date from the 17th century, so the Ottoman period. This is another view from the other bank of the river, full view there, a close-up, and then a final shot with, if you can see, a person actually walking across at the top there. It might seem a bit strange to us that a song should be dedicated to a bridge, but these constructions, while stable, if built properly, could over time deteriorate and become quite dangerous. There was a real danger then of collapse if it wasn't built properly. Think of the famous English nursery tale, London Bridge is Falling Down, from the 18th century. While there are different theories about its underlying meaning, one of them views it as a song about the normal deterioration of an old bridge. And you might also recall the news reports at the beginning of the year on a number of stone-built bridges collapsing around different regions of Greece. So this was a real concern for the builders of bridges, how to ensure that their construction connecting one region to another would be as stable as possible. So let's take a look now at the actual song, and my helpers will hand out both a Greek and an English version of the song, and I'll read out the song. I'll read one or two lines in Greek and then give the English translation. We'll have a look at the story itself and then highlight a number of poetic devices characteristic of the form of demotic songs that contribute to their entertainment value, the things that make them enjoyable to listen to, and then we'll consider its content in more depth. The first thing to note is that by looking at the song on paper, we lose a few critical elements of it. We don't have the singer's voice, so we don't have the singing. We don't have the music that usually accompanied these songs, or the dancing that may have been part of the performance. Also, keep in mind that these songs are part of the oral tradition, so there's no single composer. They were handed down from one generation to the next, with many singers changing bits, adding their own bits over time. So these songs are of the people as a whole. That doesn't look right, does it? Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there, but the version that you're going to get is fine. Okay, so I'll just start, and we're almost there, so I'll mention the line numbers so that everybody can follow. If you don't have a copy just yet, you will have one soon. Της Άρτας το Ιοφίλι. 45 μάστοροι και 60 μαθητάδες. 45 master craftsmen and 60 apprentices. 3 χρόνους εδουλεύανε της Άρτας το Ιοφίλι. For 3 years were working on the Bridge of Arta. Ολημερείς εχτίζανε και από βραδύ γκρεμιέται. All day they would build and in the evening it collapses. Μυριολογούν οι μάστορες και κλαίνουν οι μαθητάδες. The master craftsmen lament and the apprentices weep. Αλίμονο στους σκόπους μας, κρίμα στις δουλεψές μας, ολημερείς να χτίζουμε, το βράδυ να γκρεμιέται. Alas for our efforts, alas for our labours, all day to build and in the evening for it to collapse. Line 7 now. Και το στοιχείο αποκρίθηκε από την δεξιά καμάρα, and the spirit of the river, a ghost in other words, spoke up from the right-hand arch. Αν δεν στοιχιώσετε άνθρωπο, τείχος δεν θεμελιώνει, και μη στοιχιώσετε ορφανό, μη ξένο, μη διαβάτη, παρά του πρωτομάστορα την όρια τη γυναίκα, πόρχεται αργά τα ποταχιά, πόρχεται αργά στο γιώμα. Unless you sacrifice a human, no wall stands firm. And don't sacrifice an orphan or a stranger, nor a passer-by, but no one else but the master builder's beautiful wife, who comes here slowly in the morning, who comes here slowly at mealtime. Line 12. Τ' άκουσε ο πρωτομάστορας και του θανάτου πέφτει. The master builder heard it and falls down like a dead man. Κάνει γραφή και στέλνει την με το πουλί τα ειδώνει. He writes a note and sends it to her with the bird, the nightingale. Αργά ντυθεί, αργά λαχτεί, αργά να πάει στο γιώμα, αργά να πάει και να διαβεί τη σάρτα στο γιοφύρι. Let her dress slowly, let her change slowly, let her bring the meal slowly to cross the Bridge of Arta. He loves his wife, he doesn't want her to die, he's trying to buy time, tell her not to hurry, to come late. Now we're on line 16. Και το πουλί παράκουσε και αλλιώς επήγε κι είπε. And the bird misheard and went and said otherwise. That's the tragedy of this story. The bird misheard. What did the bird go and say? Line 17. Γοργά ντύσου, γοργά άλλαξε, γοργά να πας στο γιώμα, γοργά να πας και να διαβείς τη σάρτα στο γιοφύρι. Dress quickly, change quickly, bring the meal quickly, go quickly to cross the Bridge of Arta. Να την και ξανάφανε από την άσπρη στράτα. Δέσι, she appeared on the white road. Την είδε ο πρωτομάστορας, ραγίζεται η καρδιά του. The master builder saw her, his heart breaks, his heart's shattered. Από μακριά τους χαιρετά και από μακριά τους λέγει. From afar she greets them, from afar she says to them. Γεια σας, χαρά σας μάστορες και εσείς οι μαθητάδες. Μα τι έχει ο πρωτομάστορας και είναι έτσι χολιασμένος. Greetings to you builders and to you also apprentices. But what's wrong with the master builder? Why is he so irritated? Το δαχτυλίδι το έπεσε στην πρώτη την καμάρα και ποιος να μπει και ποιος να βγει το δαχτυλίδι να βρει. They tell her, his wedding ring fell into the first chamber, the ark of the bridge. And who will go down in there and who will come up again to find the ring for him? Μάστορα, μην πικραίνεσαι, και εγώ να πάω στο φέρω. Εγώ να μπω και εγώ να βγω το δαχτυλίδι να βρω. So she says, Master, don't worry. I'll go to bring it to you. I'll go in and I'll come back out to find the ring for you. Μη δε καλά κατέβηκε, μη δε στη μέση επήγε, she had hardly gone down, hardly reached the middle. Τράβα καλέ την άλυσο, τράβα την αλυσίδα, τ' όλον τον κόσμο να γυρά και τίποτες δεν ήβρα. She's realized that they want to enclose her in this structure. Pull the chain, my dear, pull the chain, because I've looked everywhere and I've found nothing. Ένας πηχάει με το μυστρί και άλλος με τον ασβέστη. Παίρνει και ο πρωτομάστορας και ρίχνει μέγα λίθο. One of the builders comes with the trowel, another one with the mortar, and the master builder himself takes and throws a large stone. He has to show the rest that it's okay to do this. The job has to get done. Αλίμονο στη μοίρα μας, κρίμα στο ριζικό μας, 3 αδερφάδες ήμασταν και οι 3 κακογραμμένες. Alas for our fate, she says, alas for our destiny. We were 3 sisters and all 3 doomed, ill-fated. Η μια χτίσε το Δούναβι και η άλλη τον Αυλώνα και εγώ η πιο στερνότερη τη Σάρτα στο Ιοφύρι. One built the Danube, that's a river, the other the Avlonas, another river, and I, the youngest, the Bridge of Arta. Καθώς τρέμει η καρδούλα μου να τρέμει το γιοφύρι και ως πέφτουν τα μαλάκια μου να πέφτουν οι διαβάτες. So she says, as my poor heart trembles, may this bridge tremble. And as my hair falls, may the passers-by fall. What have you done to me? Let anybody who crosses this bridge drown, she's saying. And they say to her, Kori, ton logon άλλαξε και άλλη κατάρα δώσε, που έχεις μονάκριβα αδερφό, μιλάχει και περάσει. Girl, take back your word and give a different curse, because you have a precious brother, lest he happen to pass by. Και αυτή τον λόγον άλλαξε και άλλη κατάρα δίνει. And she changed her word and gives a different curse. Σίδερον η καρδούλα μου, σίδερο το γιοφύρι. Σίδερο τα μαλάκια μου, σίδερο και οι διαβάτες. As my poor heart will be like iron, I'll be strong. May the bridge be like iron. My hair iron, the passers-by iron too. Τι έχω αδερφό στην ξενιτιά, μιλάχει και περάσει. For I have a brother abroad in foreign lands, lest he happen to pass by. So that's our song. Okay, it's a wonderful song, isn't it? And it's worth studying. Thank you for agreeing. So let's have a look now at some of the characteristic formal elements of demotic songs as reflected in the Bridge of Arta. If you count the syllables in the Greek line, it doesn't work, unfortunately, in the English translation, but if you count the syllables in the Greek version, you'll see that there are 15 syllables. So, 45 mastori. Sorry, is that a question? Sorry. I'll talk about that at the end if we have time, otherwise I'll tell you where you can find it. Yeah. 45 mastori και 60 μαθητάδες. So 15 syllables. Demotic songs are composed in a 15-syllable line. There's a break after the 8th syllable. And in other words, each line is made up of 2 half lines. And this is important because it's connected to the process of oral composition, as we'll see in a minute. If you look at lines 1, 4, and 5, these are each built out of parallel expressions. The words in each half line are different, but the sense is more or less repeated. So in line 1, 45 master craftsmen, that's the first half line, and in the second half line, and 60 apprentices. Each of those groups are working on the bridge. Line 4, the master craftsmen lament, that's the first half line, and the apprentices weep. Again, a similar idea, more or less repeated. Line 5, alas for our efforts in the first half line, alas for our labours, a repetition. Okay, then if we look at lines 3 and 6, all day they would build, and in the evening it collapses. It's not a repetition here, it's almost a contrast. All day, and then in the evening what happens. In line 6, similarly, all day to build, and then the second half line in the evening to have the bridge collapse. So we've had repetition, contrast, and then if we go back to line 3, another interesting thing that might happen in the second half line, all day they would build, that's the first half line, and in the evening it collapses. There's a change in tense. And this change in tense, so from imperfect to present, creates a dramatic effect. The present tense makes the action more direct, closer to us, more immediate. In each of these examples then, where the lines are made up of half lines, the second half line involves either a repetition, a contrast, or a tense change. We're dealing here with a poetic device that assists the singer to compose on the spot. Singers have blocks of meaning to work with, ready-made units of meaning to use in the process of creating their song. A singer says something in the first half line and knows that he or she can repeat, contrast, or change the tense in the second half line to give himself or herself time to think about what to sing next. So this method, this formulaic device, helps to move the song forward, because they're composing on the spot, remember. This is a characteristic feature of oral poetic composition. We find it in our folk songs. Albert Lord and Milman Parry noticed it in their research on folk songs in the Balkans, other folk songs in the Balkans, and also in Homeric poetry. Yoros Sifakis makes the important point that while there are some fixed formulaic units that are repeated from within a song or between songs, a singer doesn't necessarily memorize the whole song. Memorization is not key. Just as we as language users don't memorize a language. So children don't learn a language by memorizing it. As speakers of a language, we learn or we internalize the existing patterns of expression available to us. We know that if we want to express a particular statement of fact, that one of the patterns available to us is to have a sentence with a subject and a verb. Similarly, a singer learns that with this pattern, there's a first half line and a second half line where he or she, as I said, can repeat or contrast or change the tense of what has just come before. This raises another interesting feature of folk songs. They allow for both tradition and innovation. The basic plot of a song is set, and it's known by the members of the audience as well, but each singer, especially a particularly talented one or creative singer, can tweak it by introducing a little twists or surprises in the narrative to keep it fresh. This means that each performance is unique. It's different. And researchers have been able to collect numerous variants, parallayes, of songs for this reason. In our case, in this variant of the song, it's a river spirit, for instance, that tells the builders that they need to sacrifice a human being for the bridge to have a sturdy foundation. In other versions, it's a bird. In this version, the rivers named are not the same ones named in other songs. So the names of the rivers in lines 35 to 36 are different here than they are in other variants. In our variant, in line 16, the bird misheard and went and told his wife to hurry, an honest mistake. In other versions, sometimes it sounds as though it was a deliberate one. Speaking of birds, did anyone pick up the discrepancy there, the lack of consistency? If you look at line 13, we hear that the master builder wrote a note. If there was a note, why didn't his wife just read the note? The tragedy might have been avoided altogether. There's a note in line 13, but that seems to be forgotten in line 16, where the focus is on the tragic mistake that the bird makes in relaying the incorrect information to the master builder's wife. So this could very well be a consequence of the nature of oral composition. The singer might have started off with a version of the ballad that included a note written, but then he or she inserted the line later on about the bird's mistake, and in this way possibly making his or her own mistake. And then finally, before we move on, variants of this song have been found. They're not confined to Greece. We've got songs about a wife having to, or maybe a sister having to be sacrificed for a bridge to take form in the Balkans as well. Okay, so these are the things that we've been just talking about. Let's see, a few more points. These are the formal characteristics of demotic songs. So repetitions, as we said, repetitions can help a song to be created. They're also used, of course, for emphasis. Exaggeration, we hear that it was taking 3 years for the bridge to be built. A bit of an exaggeration to heighten the drama. There's a lot of vivid imagery taken from the natural world. There's personification of plants and animals in demotic songs. In other words, human attributes being given to non-humans. And we've just been speaking about the bird that talks. Comparisons and similes are also very common. So at the end of the song where we hear that she says, may her heart be, as her heart trembles, may the bridge tremble. And finally, triadic structures. This is a different kind of pattern, the rule of threes, where information is conveyed in threes. So in lines 35 and 36, we have the three sisters, for instance. The first one, the second one, and then the second line talks about the third sister. In lines 14 to 15, we have the message to the wife. Let her dress slowly, let her change slowly, and then in the second line we have the third item, let her bring the meal slowly. In lines 31 to 32, we have one of the builders coming with the trowel, the other one coming with the mortar, and then in the second line, the third item, the master builder takes and throws a large stone. The last bit of information in each of these patterns is the most important bit, and that's the one that heightens the drama. So these are all features that audiences would be familiar with, and part of the entertainment for them would be to see how skillfully a storyteller could work within the tradition to produce a song that not only satisfied their expectations, but occasionally also surprised them with a new element in the song. If we move on to content now, what are the themes, the main themes contained in this song? And the first one, of course, is human sacrifice. As I mentioned at the start, this is a fictional tale, so I have to stress that no woman was ever actually put to death in the process of building this bridge. But the custom of foundation deposits goes way back to antiquity, ancient Greece and other regions, where a ritual burial of objects, they could be ceremonial objects, precious raw materials like gold and silver. These objects were deposited under the foundations of a building that was going to be built, in pits dug under the foundations, with the intention of preventing that building from falling into ruin. So in other words, a way to keep the building safe. In ancient and more recent times, we have the sacrifice of an animal for a similar purpose. So, as you would know, the rooster is one of the most common animals sacrificed in the construction of a building. The idea, I guess, might be that the soul of a living thing is powerful, and that power could be transmitted or transferred through that living thing's death into the construction itself. And then human sacrifice would offer a higher degree of security then. And there may be something also in Walter Burkett's study of animal sacrifice, the reciprocal nature of sacrifice, the idea that we as worshippers give something to the gods to appease them, to pacify them, to please them, and they in turn, we expect that they in turn will do something good for us, will get a benefit in some way from the sacrifice that we offer. The point about it having to be the master builder's wife and no one else highlights that for an important work to be carried out, one often needs to make a correspondingly huge sacrifice. It needs to hurt. An ancient female sacrifice that may come to mind here, and that a number of scholars have pointed to, is that of Iphigenia, King Agamemnon's daughter. So Agamemnon was the commander who had assembled all the Greek forces together to set sail against Troy, to punish the Trojans for taking Helen of Sparta, but also perhaps having in mind to take control over the trade routes in that part of the world. And in Euripides' play, Iphigenia in Aulis, Iphigenia in Avlivi, there was no wind, so the ships that were ready to sail to Troy couldn't move. They couldn't leave. The priest informed Agamemnon that the goddess Artemis was behind it. She'd been offended by something that he had either said or done. There are different versions about why, and that he now had to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia to placate her, Artemis, so that she could send the required winds and enable the ships to sail to Troy. Iphigenia, on learning about the situation, goes willingly to her death. as a way of obeying her father's wishes for the greater good. She embodies the ideals of honour and sacrifice. And I myself think that the wife of the master builder comes close to these ideals by the end of the folk song. Granted, she's not named in this song, but neither is the master builder. And I recently was asked by somebody, why is it that it's always women who are sacrificed in these songs? I have a theory about this, who knows, but I don't. It's not because women are expendable. It's the opposite, I would argue. It's because women are powerful. In order for us to get a bridge to stand, we need to tame the forces of nature, the river beneath. And as we said earlier, there's a real danger of collapse. Women have more to do with those forces of nature than men, I think. What do I mean by that? Well, women are the ones who bring life into this world. That mystical process of creating a life. Of course, men have a role to play in that process, but it's women's bodies that actually produce new life. And in traditional societies, at least, it's women who tend to look after the deceased, to prepare the bodies of the dead for burial. So at both ends of the spectrum of life, it's women who have access to or are closer, somehow closer to those dangerous forces, those mysterious, mystical forces of nature than men. And therefore, I think they have a better chance of mediating between the two realms. So taming those dangerous forces that are around us. That's why I think it's women. The master builder's torment over having to choose between his public responsibilities and his personal loyalties are another thing. This is another theme. He loves his wife dearly. That's clear. As soon as he sees her, we hear that his heart breaks. He tried to prevent her death by trying to buy some time. Perhaps he could convince his crew to find some other way. But they had seen that they had been working on this bridge for years. The job had to get done. This bridge was for the good of the community, and they were depending on him. So he's torn between public and private responsibilities. Does that sound familiar at all? How many of us have been in a similar situation? Not this exactly. Remember, exaggeration is a feature of demotic songs. But, for example, you want to spend more time with the family, but you have to meet a deadline at work. What do? If you don't meet the deadline, you may not be able to provide for the family. So his dilemma reminds us of ours and forces us to consider how we would react. What would we do, knowing that the job had to get done? The wedding ring in the song symbolises marriage. The institution of marriage is so important in this era that the wife doesn't hesitate at all to jump down to try to find her husband's ring. We get a sense, I think, at least up to the middle of the song, that the bond between this husband and wife is a strong one. I don't see this song as one of a strong husband and a weak wife. I actually think that in the end, the wife turns out to be stronger than him, but we'll come to that shortly. Here, I'd like to take a minute to remind us of what the Homeric Odyssey has to say about marriage. So this is the Odyssey relating Odysseus's return to his home in Ithaca. When Odysseus has been helped by a young maiden and he wishes her well, all the best in life, this is what he says to her. May the gods give you everything that your heart longs for. May they grant you a husband and a house and sweet agreement in all things, for nothing is better than this, more steadfast than when two people, a man and his wife, keep a harmonious household. That sweet agreement, the word agreement in the Greek is omophrosini, being of like mind, like-mindedness between a husband and a wife. Now, Homer was like the Bible, the source of knowledge for the ancients. These words weren't put there for fun. It's serious. The best kind of marriage, we're told, is one where the couple is well matched. And I don't think that we should underestimate the bond cherished cherished between husband and wife in the era of the modern Greek folk songs either. The song becomes even more meaningful if we consider that the bond between the master builder and his wife was a strong one, and that it was put to the test due to other forces working against them. There are positive examples or ideals suggested when it comes to married couples in our oral poetic tradition from Homer onwards. In the Iliad, we would probably say that Hector and Andromache would have to rate as one of the best, if not the most successful couple. In the Odyssey, we have Odysseus and Penelope. They're very well suited, both intelligent, both cunning. This union is not without its problems, though. She was faithful to him, he was not faithful to her. But the point is that works of literature, whether Homeric epics or folk songs, give us examples of behaviour that we can choose to follow or reject in our own lives. The act of storytelling, where such paradigms are presented for us to evaluate, in a sense, is a fundamental part of the human experience. We all take part in storytelling. It's part of being a human being. The STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, are very significant fields of study. And if you're fortunate enough to be working in a team, a research team, you might even be involved in improving our collective quality of life. The humanities are unique in that they enable us to critically examine what we actually mean by quality of life. If this merely means prolonging life, extending our lifespan by 5 or 10 years, then perhaps we should face the fact that at some point in time, our lives will come to an end. We're going to die. It's a bit blunt, but it's the truth. Death is the great leveller. So no matter how rich or poor, sick or healthy, young or old we are, death is inescapable. We're all going to face death one day. So while we're alive, perhaps we should focus instead on how we wish to live our lives. What kind of people do we want to be? And with this in mind, I'd like to just share with you an example of how literature can impact a person's life in a quite profound way. Nikos Kazantzakis, our famous novelist, author of The Life and Times of Alexis Zorbas, or Zorba the Greek, compares us human beings, to ants crawling across a leaf. So we're born from nowhere, the abyss, the black bit, where we find ourselves on one edge of the leaf. We travel across the leaf. That is life while we're on the leaf. And then at some point we drop off the leaf back into the abyss. If you're by nature a rather pessimistic person, you might be overcome by a sense of dread. What's the point of it all? And to be honest, I think I would have been inclined to think about it this way too until I discovered Kazantzakis' novels. His characters taught me to shift my way of thinking, change my perspective. Literature allows us to learn from the experiences of others. If we're bound to be on that leaf, we can't change that. If we're born and we're here, the leaf represents life, remember, then why not try to make the most of our time on it? Why not enjoy and explore every part of that leaf? Feel every ray of sunlight that shines on it. Take every raindrop, taste every raindrop that falls on it. So you get the idea. Get to know what else is on that leaf. Live our life as fully as possible. Enjoy it while it lasts. Okay, so what's the point of all this? The point is that literature and the humanities in general give us the tools and the paradigms to work through questions such as, what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of life do I want to lead? Literature offers answers, or at least the opportunity to contemplate our individual course of action. Joseph Campbell, the famous American professor of literature who carried out a great deal of research on comparative mythology and religion, identifying similarities and differences between cultures, noted that storytelling was a very effective way for traditional societies not only to entertain their young, but also to educate their young. In our very fast-moving Facebook, Twitter worlds, we often tend, I think, to neglect the need to connect on a deeper human level and to work through problems, emotions, whatever it is that's troubling us. Literature helps us to do that. The song of the Bridge of Arta takes us on a journey through a range of situations and human emotions that we experience in our everyday lives, just as the composer or composers of this song would have experienced. So what are these? Frustration, failure to carry out a significant task. Love, the master builder trying to delay his wife's arrival to the building site so as to avoid having to yield to the other men's decision to sacrifice her for the bridge to take form. Misfortune and tragedy, the tragic error of the bird hearing incorrectly the husband's message to his wife. Despair, the master builder sees his wife arriving at the site early and he's distraught. The struggle between personal loyalty, husband to wife, and community responsibility. They're all counting on him to get the task completed. Deception, they get her to go down by pretending that her husband has lost his wedding ring. And she, out of love and loyalty and trust, goes down to find it for him. Fate, she and her two sisters were destined to die this way. Destiny, do we have any control over it? Revenge, in her anger, she curses the construction and anyone who will use it in the future. Compassion, she changes her mind because she wants to protect her brother who might one day come past this area and use the bridge. In her process of transformation, she reminds me of another well-known character from literature. And it might sound like a bit of a stretch for some people, but she reminds me of Achilles, the warrior of the Trojan War, who puts aside his rage and allows himself to finally feel compassion for another human being. The old King Priam, the enemy who has come to beg for the corpse of his dead son, Hector, so that he can give him a proper burial. So the old king reminds Achilles of his old father back home, and Achilles connects with Priam, not as a soldier or an enemy, but on a human level, and Achilles finally finds peace. Joseph Campbell has outlined his theory of the hero's journey, which exists he's noted it in many myths around the world. It involves a universal pattern which leads to transformation. There are three basic stages: separation, initiation, and return. So a hero, an individual like Achilles, is separated from his community. He then spends time in a liminal zone. He undergoes some kind of test, an initiation perhaps, and then he returns to his community transformed with additional knowledge gained from that experience. At the end of the Iliad, for instance, Achilles has learned how to transform his dangerous rage into compassion. Here in our song, the bridge itself is a linking device. It connects one place to another. It allows a crossing to take place from one bank to the other. So I think it may actually be taken to symbolise a liminal place, an in-between place where characters are tested. How do they react? How do they resolve the challenges that confront them? At the end of it all, you could take the story of the Bridge of Arta as an allegory, a story with a hidden message, a moral, demonstrating that huge sacrifices are required in order to achieve great things in life, and as an exploration of those very significant but quite complex and intricate attributes of trust and loyalty. Also, the master builder's wife shows great inner courage in accepting what she considers to be her destiny. Sometimes we don't have control over our circumstances, but we do have control over how we react to them. That's a very important life lesson right there. She moves from initial feelings of rage and revenge, understandably so, and she utters her curse, but then moves towards an admirable display of compassion for her fellow human beings in the final lines of the song when she reverses the curse. Love, rage, compassion, these are all human traits that we can relate to. And that's one of the reasons why these stories and songs are still as relevant today as they were when they were first composed. They give us an opportunity to think about and to explore what it means to be human and to decide for ourselves how we each want to live our lives. What would you do if you were faced with a similar situation as the master builder or as the master builder's wife? And not everyone's answer will be the same. We're not all the same after all, and that's the beauty of life, what makes life interesting. When I first studied this song at school, I remember that we were taught that the moral of this story had to do with the strength of sibling love. That it's her love for her brother who's away in foreign lands that persuades her to change her curse. When I taught this song for the first time and I asked my students what they thought the moral of the story might be, I'll always remember this particular answer. One of the students said that for him, the moral was, never trust your family members. I think that the idea that great enterprises require great sacrifices is a significant message to take away from this folk song. And it's very relevant, that message, that you need to make sacrifices to achieve things. But how much more powerful it becomes when it's encapsulated in a story. And I would like to close by proposing that I think that this song is a story about honour and sacrifice, not one that takes place on the battlefield of Troy, but in the everyday life or lives of common people. And our hero here, tested and transformed, turns out to be a woman, the master builder's wife. And I'm just about done. Those of us born in Australia did not necessarily grow up with the same intimate connection to these songs that our parents and grandparents had, but the opportunity to study them as part of our formal education allows us to learn about them and to share in this rich legacy. And I think that folk songs are relevant to us today because they have the potential to entertain, to educate, and to enlighten us as we each make our way across our own leaf of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stavroula. A great analysis of the song, I think. You should come here more often and give us analysis of Greek literature. I'll make the suggestion to the committee. Now we'll take some questions from the audience. Any questions? Many.
Another way of looking at it for me is it's about ignorance, fear, and power, but also fear of the power of women, the mystique of women, birth, death. But also at that period, 15th century, women were still the healers and had the knowledge of nature, etc. And what happened at that time in Europe was the witch burning, which was mostly women who had that knowledge, which was a challenge to the new science of medicine. So when I look at these things, the narrative for me is the sacrifice is usually a woman, beautiful, and therefore powerful and a threat. And that goes all the way to Zorba the Greek, where the widow has to be, if you like, sacrificed. And even now in the Greek church, the women have to be controlled. So what do you think of that interpretation?
I think it's a perfectly valid interpretation. Thank you very much for that. That's the beauty of literature. We all come to it with our own experiences, and there are more than one. There are more than one. There are valid interpretations. We don't have to go with one or the other. Yeah, I think you have valid points there. I prefer to take it differently.
Thank you. Stephie, that was a beautiful presentation, and I really enjoyed looking at folk songs. I think that's just wonderful what you did this evening. Thank you very much for referring to my lecture, and you might be interested to know, people might be interested to know, and I'm going to mention it in a couple of weeks in Growing Up Greek during the 50s, etc. But one of our wonderful writers, Dionysia Moussoura Tsoukalam, has wrote a really striking short story where she melds to Yofiritis Artas with the collapse of the Westgate Bridge. And what she does, and why I really loved it, and I mention it when I look at that, is that whereas, please forgive me, Stephie, but I do not share your gorgeous interpretation of the sacrifice of the woman. I sort of agree with many. But what I loved about Dionysia's, what she did, was that she looked at something that our most beloved George Zangalis often mentions in his talks, that she looked at the sacrifice, the metaphoric and literal sacrifice of immigrants. And so she uses the bridge in the collapse of a bridge here in Melbourne, and she aligns it with the Bridge of Arta. So, and says that, look, immigrants had to be sacrificed for something so huge to be successfully erected. So thank you very much, because you then get us thinking about all these things.
That's the point.
So thank you, Stephie.
Thank you. It's a great idea.
I wasn't quite ready to ask a question so quickly. I noted that a theme throughout your talk was about forgiveness, and probably more importantly, self-forgiveness. Would that be right, or did I miss something?
No, a number of things, but yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've often wondered at the connection between the Odyssey and the Iliad, for that matter, and Christianity, and that sort of message which goes through of the New Testament in particular. And I was wondering if you could talk to that.
I'm not sure what the question is exactly. To talk about...
Is there a connection? So, I've often wondered whether there is a connection between Homer and the New Testament and the teachings in the New Testament.
Well, I guess, yeah, Christianity came into the picture. People who have embraced Christianity knew of Homer. The first Christians grew up in that tradition, that Homeric tradition. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's overlap there. And it's more than that, though. It's just a human need to explore these issues. So whether it's Homeric or the biblical sources, this is a human need that we have. So I think that's probably where the connection comes from.
Oh, thank you. I was just struck by the similarity of this bridge, that big arch, with the Bridge of Mostar in Slovenia, I think. It's very famous, a very similar arch. It's just interesting, yeah.
I don't know of that bridge, but one interesting point that I came across recently was that there were, and actually I spoke with Dean Kalimnios, who a lot of people know, and he was telling me also that there are songs about this theme as far away as Syria and Iraq. That I didn't know. I knew about the versions in the Balkans, and in my reading I came across that there were guilds of builders who were engaged to build the wealthy houses throughout the Ottoman Empire during the Ottoman period. So the similarity might be due to similar construction techniques used by these groups of builders' guilds originating from Epirus.
Thank you very much, Stephie, for your lecture. It was really, really, really good. I loved it. the line 39 and 40 where it says «Κόρη των λόγων άλλαξε και άλλη κατάρα δώσε, πόχης μονάκριβα αδερφό μη λάχει και περάσει». Who says that? Is that the master builder or is it one of the others? And it sounds like she was kind of emotionally, like she was blackmailed into her decision to change her, like a guilt trip type thing. Do you think she would have made that decision if that line was not there?
All right, very good question. So who says it? I think it's the others. I wouldn't have expected her husband to address her as Kori. Might be possible, but I think it's just the group, as a group. And in terms of your the second part of your question, I see what you mean. I would say that, you know, if it was just her brother that she was concerned about, she could have said something else that protected only her brother. But in the end, what she does is think about all of those passers-by. So there's a bit more to it than just protecting her brother, even though that's what it looks like on a first reading of it. If you think about it, it's a little bit more than that, I think. Yeah.
Hi, Stephie. Just a question. So with the Bridge of Arta and the demotic songs, do they really influence like the works of Kavafi and Seferis and modern Greek poets? Is like demotic poetry, did that kind of pave the way for modern Greek poetry, or is it kind of something that's just completely separate?
Thank you, Margarita. No. Yes, there are influences, definitely. All sorts of influences in terms of the imagery that's used in some of the poetry by Seferis, for instance. But I guess the major influence would be the language. So those are the poets, Seferis, Elitis, Ritsos, who are using modern Greek, the language of the folk songs. So that, I would say, is the major similarity. As opposed to Katharevousa. Sorry, I didn't say that. The older form of Greek. So there's a development, and those poets use the current language, the version that the commoners, the common people, are using.
Stephie, thank you very much for your masterful presentation. I taught the poem very many times myself, but I didn't do as good a job as you have done tonight. Okay.
I'm sure you did a very wonderful job yourself. Thank you.
I will venture to suggest to you that you should present lectures like that to the Greek politicians and Australian politicians.
Just a couple of points. First of all, thank you very much for your wonderful exposition of the Euphrates Artas. In partially commenting on something that someone said before me, I think the Mastery and Mathitades are the chorus of the Greek tragedy. They are the ones who are saying to the wife, να αλλάξει την κατάρα και όλα αυτά. The other thing, just a small kind of sub-note, there are two very well-known writers who both used that and wrote plays. One of them is Giorgos Theotokos, to Euphrates Artas, and the other one is Nikos Kazantzakis with Protomastoras. And Protomastoras, in fact, was set to music by Manolis Kalomiris back in the 1920s as an opera, just as a matter of interest. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment. And speaking of music, I said that I would note where you could find an example of this song online. If you search on Google for Skiathos, that's an island just north of Evia, Domna Samiou, who was an ethnographer, went around and collected a lot of songs and dances, recorded lots of interesting information. There's a YouTube clip of a group from the 70s. It looks like villagers from a place in Skiathos dancing to this song. And it's very interesting if you listen to it, and there's a leader who says the first half line, and then the group dancing repeats it, and then the leader goes on to the next half line, and so on. So, Skiathos, Bridge of Arta, Vomna Samil, and you'll find something online there.
Any more questions? Oh, yeah.
Just a follow on from what you've just said, because I've only ever heard it read out, or like a poem, I was curious about the rhythm. Was it said as entertainment, or was there movement involved, so dancing to it?
Yes. Well, it depends, but dancing could be involved as well. Yes, there was music accompanied by musical instruments, the singing of it. I don't think we have time for me to search and find it for you. Sorry about that. But again, if you look at it, if you look for it online, you'll have one version of it at least from the 70s. But yes, usually these songs were performed in context, celebrating various moments in life, birth, marriages, musical instruments, singing and dancing.
Yeah. I played a couple of versions in last Wednesday's program on 3ZZZ. So there is a classical version of it with a whole orchestra and singing, and there is also with clarino. So there are different versions of it, and yes, they are very easily found on the internet.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions? No? Thank you.
Somebody's got it.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you. From the 70s. And there are school groups who are singing it online as well. You see those sorts of groups.
So this is a school group that's singing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, everybody,
Stephie.
for your patience as well. Thank you.
Very much. This is from us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the sponsors for tonight's lecture, Mr. George Galonopoulos and Mr. Christos Fifis. And I'd like to remind you about the next Dardalis Hellenic Archives Research Seminar lecture with Mrs. Dounis on the 21st of August. It's a Wednesday here. And next week's lecture is on Alexander in art. Don't miss it. Thank you very much. Good night.